Amaka was the kind of girl who carried herself like she ruled the school. Everyone knew her not because she was brilliant, but because she was stubborn and untouchable. She hardly attended classes, and on the rare occasions she appeared, her presence was like a storm. She would sit at the back, chewing gum, scrolling through her phone, and daring anyone, even the teachers, to correct her. Her classmates whispered about her arrogance, but none dared to confront her. To them, Amaka was a boss lady, feared and admired for her boldness, but also pitied because her stubbornness was slowly dragging her future into darkness. It wasn't that Amaka wasn't intelligent. She was sharp, too sharp, in fact, but she believed school was beneath her. She loved attention, fashion, and the feeling of power that came with being different. Teachers complained, parents worried, but Amaka brushed them all off. To her, school was just a place to pass time until something bigger came along. She had no real motivation to change, and deep inside, she liked the reputation she had built. No one expected anything better from her, not even herself. Everything remained the same until a new Corper, Daniel, was posted to their school. He was young, handsome, and carried a calmness that made people naturally respect him. His smile was disarming, his voice firm yet gentle. The girls whispered excitedly about him in the corridors, and some even dreamed of being noticed by him. At first, Amaka dismissed the noise until she saw him with her own eyes. Something shifted in her heart that day. For the first time, the untouchable boss lady felt vulnerable. Amaka didn't just admire Corper Daniel like the other girls. She wanted him to see her, to notice her, to treat her as someone special. And so began the quiet transformation of the girl everyone thought could never change. From the very first day she saw Corper Daniel in the staff room, Amaka felt something she had never felt before. He wasn't just handsome, there was a quiet dignity about him that set him apart. His neatly pressed khaki uniform, his confident posture, and the way he spoke with respect to both teachers and students made him shine like a star in her eyes. Unlike other young men who often looked down on students, Daniel treated everyone fairly. He carried himself with the grace of a leader, and it stirred something deep inside Amaka. The boss lady who never cared about classes suddenly found herself arriving at school earlier than usual. She would sit near the front, pretending to pay attention, though her eyes often drifted to where Daniel stood at the board. Her classmates noticed a strange change and whispered behind her back, "Is this the same Amaka?" They asked each other. Some laughed, some doubted, but everyone was shocked. For the first time, Amaka was not skipping classes, she was chasing knowledge. Or rather, chasing someone who inspired her. Amaka began looking for excuses to be around Daniel. If he needed chalk, she was the first to run. If he carried books, she would offer to help. Even when he didn't ask, she would rush to buy him sachet water or snacks from the school shop. Sometimes she even saved her pocket money to buy him small gifts, a pen, a notebook, or a packet of biscuits. To others, it seemed desperate. Her classmates teased her, whispering that she was wasting her time on someone who didn't even know she existed. But Amaka didn't care. To her, Daniel wasn't just another teacher. He was the one person who made her want to be better. Yet Daniel himself seemed completely unaware of her feelings. To him, Amaka was just another student, one among many. He greeted her politely, accepted her gifts with a kind smile, and moved on with his day. But deep inside, Amaka hoped that one day he would notice her differently, not as a stubborn student but as the girl whose heart beat for him alone. Amaka's transformation did not go unnoticed. To the teachers, it was a miracle. The once notorious boss lady was suddenly attentive, respectful, and eager to learn. She now carried her notes, asked questions in class, and even submitted assignments on time. Some teachers secretly wondered if she had been replaced by someone else. But while the staff saw progress, her classmates only saw comedy. The girls in her class, especially those who also admired Corper Daniel, found her behavior laughable. During break, they would giggle behind her back and whisper loudly on purpose, "Look at Amaka, the so-called boss lady, now running errands like a house girl," one of them mocked. Another added, "She thinks Daniel will fall in love with her. He doesn't even see her." Their laughter stung Amaka, but she refused to let it break her resolve. She would raise her chin, smile, and pretend not to hear them, though deep down, every word cut like a blade. One afternoon, As Amaka hurried across the compound with a bottle of water for Corper Daniel, a group of girls burst into laughter. "Madam Daniel's wife," they shouted. Some even clapped sarcastically as she passed. Her face burned with embarrassment, but she kept walking. Inside her heart, she told herself that she wasn't doing it for their approval. She was doing it because Daniel was worth it. When she got home that day, she locked herself in her room and cried quietly into her pillow. The mockery continued, but so did her transformation. Amaka had started enjoying learning for the first time in her life. She began to see the beauty of knowledge and the satisfaction of good grades. Even though Daniel had not given her any special attention, his presence alone was enough to push her into becoming a different person. What her parents, teachers, and friends could not achieve, a simple admiration for Daniel had done. But soon, someone else besides her classmates began to notice her change, and this person decided to take the matter up with Daniel himself. It was during a quiet afternoon in the staff room that one of the senior teachers, Mrs. Aki, leaned back in her chair and studied Amaka through the window. She had been observing her for weeks and still couldn't believe the difference. The Amaka she knew never sat quietly with her books, never paid attention in class, and certainly never volunteered to help teachers. Yet now, there she was neatly dressed, books open, taking notes as though her future depended on it. The change was so dramatic that Mrs. Aki decided she could no longer ignore it. Later that day, when Daniel walked into the staff room carrying a pile of exercise books, she beckoned him over. "Young man," she said with a curious smile, "do you know you've done what none of us could do in years?" Daniel looked puzzled. "What do you mean, Ma?" he asked politely. Mrs. Aki folded her arms. "Amaka, that girl has never listened to anyone. She was rebellious, stubborn, and hardly came to school. But since you came, she's changed. She attends classes, takes notes, and even shows respect to her classmates. Honestly, we are all surprised." Daniel blinked in surprise. He had noticed Amaka's presence in his classes more often, but he never thought much of it. To him, she was just one of the many students he was assigned to teach. Hearing that he was the reason behind her transformation left him stunned. "Really? Amaka?" he muttered. "Yes, really," Mrs. Aki chuckled. "She even brings gifts to the staff room sometimes, always asking where you are. Can't you see she admires you? Whatever it is you're doing, keep it up. You may have changed her life." Daniel nodded slowly, his mind racing. He had never imagined his influence on Amaka could be this deep. Later that day, he resolved to speak to her privately. He realized that beyond her stubbornness, there was a young girl longing for direction. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was his duty to guide her down the right path. The sun was beginning to set when the last bell of the day rang. Students poured out of their classrooms, chattering excitedly as they hurried toward the school gate. Amaka lingered behind, gathering her books slowly, her eyes sneaking glances at the staff room window where Corper Daniel usually sat. That was when she saw him approaching. Her heart skipped a beat. "Amaka," he called softly. His voice was calm, but it carried the kind of authority that made her straighten up immediately. She nodded nervously, clutching her books tightly against her chest. "Yes, sir." Daniel motioned for her to follow him to a quiet corner under a tree in the compound. For the first time, Amaka felt her boldness drain away. She wasn't the boss lady anymore. She was just a teenage girl standing before someone she deeply admired. Daniel studied her for a moment before speaking. "I've noticed how serious you've become lately. Your teachers also told me how much you've changed. That's good, Amaka. I'm proud of you." Amaka's cheeks warmed. She didn't know what to say, so she looked down at her shoes. Daniel continued, his tone shifting to one of gentle seriousness. "But I want you to understand something important. Life is not about impressing someone else. It's about building yourself, your future, your character. If you come to school only because of me, then what happens when I leave? Will you go back to the old Amaka?" His words struck her deeply. She wanted to protest, to say she truly cared about him, but something in his eyes silenced her. They weren't the eyes of a man who saw her as a crush. They were the eyes of a mentor, a brother, someone who wanted the best for her. "Amaka," he said finally, "you are capable of great things, but only if you choose to do them for yourself. Don't let anyone, not even me, be the reason you succeed. Let your own future be the reason." Tears welled up in Amaka's eyes. For the first time, she understood. She nodded slowly. whispering, "I'll try, sir." "No, I will." And in that moment, the stubborn girl who once ruled the school with arrogance began her journey to becoming a better version of herself. The days that followed, Daniel's advice marked the beginning of a new chapter in Amaka's life. For once, her change wasn't about impressing him, it was about proving something to herself. She began to rise early, ironing her uniform neatly, and arriving at school on time. She no longer strolled in with the air of a boss lady. Instead, she slipped quietly into her seat, pen in hand, ready to learn. Her teachers noticed the difference. When they asked questions in class, Amaka no longer rolled her eyes or ignored them. She raised her hand and attempted answers, sometimes right, sometimes wrong, but always eager to try. Her classmates were bewildered. This was the same Amaka who once mocked them for being bookworms. Now, she was not only listening in class but also helping others with their assignments. She had begun to smile more, greet people politely, and even share her snacks during break. Some of the girls who used to laugh at her devotion to Daniel found themselves speechless, and the boys who once feared her fiery temper started to see her as approachable. The wall she had built around herself was slowly crumbling, replaced by bridges of friendship she had never cared to build before. Though Daniel remained her inspiration, Amaka's focus shifted. She started thinking about her future, what kind of woman she wanted to become, what dreams she wanted to chase. She realized that education was not a punishment but a ladder, and each lesson was a step upward. Sometimes, she would still find her heart fluttering when Daniel smiled at her in class. But now she saw him less as a man to admire and more as a mentor guiding her journey. By the end of the term, Amaka's grades had improved dramatically. Her parents were shocked when her name appeared among the top 10 students in the school. For the first time in years, they were proud, and her mother hugged her tightly at home. Amaka realized that she was no longer living for Daniel's attention, she was living for her own destiny. Amaka lay on her bed one evening, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above her. She thought about Daniel, his calm voice, his encouraging words, and the brotherly concern in his eyes when he had spoken to her. For weeks, she had battled with her emotions, torn between the innocent crush she had carried in her heart and the reality of who Daniel truly was in her life. But as she grew in character and maturity, the truth became clearer. Daniel was never meant to be her lover. He was her guide, the light God had sent into her life to pull her out of the darkness she once lived in. The next day at school, she walked into the classroom with a new kind of confidence, not the prideful swagger of the boss lady she used to be, but the quiet dignity of someone who had found purpose. Her classmates noticed a change in her aura. She was no longer chasing Daniel's attention with gifts and errands. Instead, she sat with her peers, joined in group discussions, and even encouraged some of the weaker students to take their studies more seriously. The same girls who once mocked her began to admire her, though most of them were too proud to say it out loud. Daniel himself noticed a shift. When Amaka approached him now, it wasn't with shy, longing eyes but with questions about her studies, or sometimes just a simple thank you for his lessons. He respected her more for that, and his admiration for her growth showed in the way he smiled at her progress. For Amaka, it was liberating. She no longer felt the heavy weight of trying to win Daniel's heart. Instead, she found joy in winning her own battles, discipline over laziness, kindness over arrogance, and humility over pride. Letting go of her crush wasn't easy, but it was necessary. She finally understood that real love wasn't about clinging to someone. It was about becoming the best version of yourself. And that, she realized, was the greatest gift Daniel had given her. As the months rolled by, Amaka's transformation became the talk of the school. Teachers who once sighed in frustration at the mention of her name now praised her openly in the staff room. Her classmates, who once laughed at her devotion to Daniel, now turned to her for help with assignments and explanations. Slowly, Amaka's reputation changed from that of the arrogant boss lady to a respected role model among her peers. Corper Daniel observed all of this with quiet satisfaction. On several occasions, he caught himself smiling when Amaka stood up to answer a question confidently in class. The girl who once hid behind stubbornness and pride was blossoming before his eyes. One afternoon, after a particularly good presentation in English class, He called her aside again. "Amaka," he said warmly, "do you know how proud I am of you?" Her eyes widened slightly. "Proud of me, sir?" she asked. "Yes." He nodded firmly. "Not because you're perfect, but because you've grown. You've shown that change is possible. You're not just studying, you're becoming a leader. Keep going, Amaka. The future is brighter than you think." His words filled her with joy, not the childish excitement of a crush, but the deep satisfaction of knowing she had earned his respect. It was no longer about gifts or errands. It was about growth, hard work, and character. For the first time, Amaka saw herself not as a girl chasing approval, but as a young woman building her destiny. The pride Daniel felt was not his alone. Other teachers began to use Amaka's story as an example to encourage stubborn students. Parents spoke of her change during PTA meetings. She had unknowingly become a testimony of transformation, all because one young Corper had chosen to see beyond her flaws. But even as Amaka flourished, time was slipping away. The end of Daniel's service year was drawing near, and with it, the reality that their paths would soon part. The day everyone had dreaded finally arrived. After 12 months of dedicated service, Corper Daniel's time at the school had come to an end. The principal and staff decided to organize a small sent-forth celebration in his honor, and the entire compound buzzed with excitement. Students rehearsed songs, the cultural troupe prepared a dance, and the teachers gathered funds to buy him a farewell gift. On the morning of the event, the school hall was decorated with colorful ribbons and balloons, chairs were neatly arranged, and a banner that read "Farewell to our beloved Corper Daniel" hung proudly at the front. Students, usually noisy and restless, sat quietly, waiting for the program to begin. The atmosphere was thick with emotion. When Daniel walked in, dressed in his crisp khaki uniform one last time, the hall erupted in cheers and applause. Some students clapped until their palms turned red, others whistled, and many shouted his name with affection. Teachers smiled proudly as he took his seat at the front. Amaka, sitting among her classmates, felt a lump in her throat. She had prepared herself for this day, but it was harder than she imagined. One by one, students and teachers took turns to speak about him. They praised his kindness, his discipline, and the way he inspired everyone to do better. The cultural troupe danced, and the school choir sang a farewell song that brought tears to many eyes. Even the principal, a stern man rarely moved by emotion, admitted that Daniel had left a mark on the school. When it was Amaka's turn to speak, her hands trembled slightly as she walked to the podium. She didn't confess her old crush, those feelings were long gone, but she spoke from the heart. "Sir," she said, her voice steady despite the tears forming in her eyes, "you didn't just teach me English. You taught me discipline, respect, and the value of hard work. You made me believe in myself when no one else could. I will never forget you." The hall went silent. Then came the sound of soft applause, followed by louder clapping until the whole hall was on its feet. Corper Daniel smiled, his eyes misty with emotion. But behind the cheers and celebration, Amaka knew this was goodbye. The celebration ended with laughter, tears, and heartfelt goodbyes as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm glow over the school compound. Students crowded around Corper Daniel, each one trying to get a final handshake, a photograph, or even just a smile. The atmosphere was bittersweet, filled with joy for the memories shared, but heavy with the sadness of parting. Amaka stood a little distance away, watching quietly. A year ago, she would have pushed to the front, desperate to be noticed, but now, she understood that true respect was not demanded, it was earned. She walked up to him calmly when the crowd thinned. "Sir," she said softly, "thank you for everything. I promise to keep making you proud." Daniel smiled, his expression filled with warmth. "I know you will, Amaka," he replied. "You don't need me anymore. You've found your own path. Hold on to it." His words sank deep into her heart, not as a goodbye, but as a reminder that his influence would live on through her choices. The next day, the school felt different without him. The sight of the empty staff room chair and the absence of his calm voice during morning assembly left a hollow space. Some students cried openly. Others whispered stories about him in class, and even the teachers admitted they missed his presence. Yet amid the sadness, something remained: his legacy. For Amaka, life had taken on a new meaning. She attended her classes with renewed purpose, no longer to impress anyone but to build her own future. Her classmates no longer mocked her. Instead, many began to follow her example. She had grown into a leader, not by force or arrogance, but by transformation. As weeks turned into months, and Daniel's memory slowly became a story the juniors heard from their seniors, Amaka never forgot the lesson he had given her under the tree that day. Success must come from within. Corper Daniel might have left, but his impact was permanent. He had planted a seed, and in Amaka, that seed had blossomed into a better person. And so, the stubborn boss lady of yesterday became a young woman with vision, discipline, and hope, a girl whose life was forever changed because one Corper walked into her school and left behind a lasting legacy. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss more inspiring and life-changing stories like this. Thank you.